Right? Hi, I'm Diana. I am the host of Emergency Drinks, and I'm here today with Dr. Kat Wallace. And if you've been following me for any amount of time, you know, well, okay, wait, if you've been following me since 2020, you
Yeah.
know that I was like a super anxious person when it comes to COVID. And Dr. Kat is actually like who kept me relatively sane. I don't think I was ever like fully sane. I still don't think I'm sane post
Yeah.
COVID. Like I'm still dealing with like COVID, like
I
although a
am
lot of
too.
other people aren't, like I'm still very much like keep me away from COVID.
Yeah.
But you were so helpful and so calming and so just like when I was like I was walking my dog one day and someone like walked by me and coughed and I called my mom in a panic and I was like, "Mom, am I going to get COVID?" And she's like, "Girl, you need to calm down." But you were the one that was able to like keep me calm, like a stranger on the TikTok. So I just kind of want to talk about you. Like, so you're an epidemiologist. For those people that don't know what that means, what does that mean?
Yeah. So hi, my name is Dr. Katrine Wallace, Dr. Cat online, and I'm an epidemiologist. I work at University of Illinois, Chicago. So I went and I got my PhD there in 2013, and I've just sort of been there ever since. I'm like the person that they can't get rid of. Now I'm on the faculty. So an epidemiologist is somebody who studies kind of the distribution of diseases in populations to try to figure out like what sick people might have in common so we count cases and then try to figure out what the cases have in common. And then the reason we do that is to sort of try to prevent cases. So if we find out all the cases are of some disease are smokers, we can say, okay, then if you don't smoke, you might be able to prevent X disease. So we count cases and then we try to figure out what the risk factors are. So that's basically the two main jobs that we have. And then, of course, as you're referring to over the pandemic, I had a third job, which was sort of communicating science to lay people, which was really awesome. And something that I wasn't ever planning to do. The only science communication I ever had done up to that point was in class teaching. And then, my first videos are really embarrassing because I was teaching like I was teaching to my graduate students. Yeah, but it just sort of took off and I'm still here doing it 4 years later. But
So
yeah, so thanks for that nice introduction.
let's journey back in time to like 2019, the end of 2019, when I think we all probably got that news alert saying that coronavirus was an epidemic. Like, what went through your head at that point? Did it like, was it on your radar? Were you like, oh my God, this is about to be like a giant disaster?
I wasn't right away thinking that way. I remember hearing that there were kind of strange pneumonias in China, and honestly, like from a public health perspective, we had seen this before with SARS-CoV, the original SARS virus, and that virus was so kind of deadly that it never really spread to the rest of the world. So I kind of thought it was sort of either something similar to that or that it would be kind of along those lines. So I wasn't panicking immediately. Even I wasn't even panicking yet when we were starting to have like kind of travel related cases in the US. When I did start to panic was when I started seeing like community transmission within other countries besides China. That's when it started getting real to me.
Mm-hmm. What kind of conversations were you having at that point?
So a lot of us were sort of, because we were getting a lot of questions. So that's the reason I started making my videos to begin with, honestly, was because I was getting so many questions and texts and, my family and my friends. And so I thought, okay, at this point in time, my social media accounts were really small. And I just started making videos just for my own friends and family, just to kind of allay their concerns and answer questions. And honestly, I didn't know that much. So every day back then, we didn't have that much data, right? So I would just talk about the data that we did have and what US cases we have, what new states had a new case. So it's so weird to talk about this now. In March of 2020, when I went to Las Vegas with a bunch of friends, we were, all down there and I was looking at how many cases and there was no cases in Nevada. So I felt very safe. And then I flew home and then that was the week that everything shut down. And I was kind of like, wow, I can't believe I was flying. Like it's so crazy to think about how everything just changed overnight, you know?
Well, funny that you were in Las Vegas because that's where I used to be based. And so we were like crossing paths because I was in New York speaking at an event the day New York declared a state of emergency. And like at that point, I was just like, I'm signing waivers. Like, if I get sick, it's not your fault. And I flew from New York to Chicago because I was going through meetings, just living my life. And, we all knew that something was happening, but didn't know what.
Right.
And then I flew back to Vegas. And literally, as every place I visited within that month was shut down right behind me. And I'm just like, oh my God. And then 2 days later, Vegas shut down. And I remember telling someone, like, it feels like, when you're growing up and you have snow days and you're going to get a really big snowstorm and like schools are going to close, like that's what it felt like, but with like impending doom attached to it. Like we're about to
Yes.
have like some crazy shit happen. And of course,
And so that's kind of why I started to make my videos, because at that point it was like kind of pandemonium. So yeah, so that's why I started making my videos for just friends and family. Every day I would come on and I would just give like a data dump of everything I knew about. And then those started getting forwarded to other people and shared around the internet to people's friends. And then that's how it sort of grew the way it did. And at one point during the pandemic, it was like every day it would grow. It's not like that anymore. But at the beginning, when everybody was scared and needing information, there was a lot of growth in my account, like early in 2020. So yeah, so here I am 4 years later, still doing it. And it's fun. It's actually been a really, it's kind of been an honor actually when I hear stories like you, when you're saying like, oh, you helped me. And from my side, this as a content creator, you don't see what people you affect really unless they tell you.
yeah.
It's very kind of lonely and one-sided. You make your video, you upload it, and then you get comments and stuff, but it's not, you don't really get that like, oh, you really helped me, or you helped my mom decide to get the vaccine and she's 80, or like things like that
Yeah.
really meant a lot to me. So I love hearing stories about how like my videos were actually useful to people early.
Gajillion. I remember one time, I was exposed to COVID and I was terrified. And I remember this was like, we didn't really connect until like maybe not even a year ago, but um, I was on your TikTok and I left a question and I was like, what about the 6-foot rule or something? And I was so scared. I didn't get it. But also that was the time when like you had to do like the saliva test and you would like mail it.
Yes,
And I'm just like, how did we ever actually like what?
I
Like the
know.
things even I did after like, because I was so careful, like you couldn't see me if you had seen anyone else in like the 2 weeks before. Like if you
I
were
was the
near
same.
me, yeah, like outside only. If you even like sniffled, I'd be like, is that COVID? Are you
Yep.
sick? And now I'm like seeing like all how bad it really was. And like, but also when you're in it, it's really bad, but also you've been like quarantined, holed up in your place for however long. Like I didn't really have a pod. And it was just like I just needed to like see people and get outside. And I'm like, I can't believe I even like went and did some of the things I did, because and I didn't really do that much. Like, my sense of like adventure, my risk was like sitting outside with someone that had quarantined for 2 weeks, having a glass of wine.
Right. No,
It's hard,
exactly.
but
And I would go roller skating during the pandemic. That was like my sanity,
Mhm.
because it was like outside and it was just basically myself. And I'd put videos up of me roller skating and I would get all these trolls like, why aren't you wearing a mask,
Yeah.
liberal?
Cheap. So actually, I do want to talk about that because I know just for me, like me talking about COVID and like not being an expert, not being anything, like it was really the first time I really started to speak about like things that didn't have to do with being vegan. And the amount of
Just
hate.
Yeah.
the amount of people being like, how could you wear a mask? It's toxic. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what are you listening to? What are you watching? What are some of like the craziest things like people said to you?
Well, there was all kinds of them. Like, at the very
Yeah.
beginning of the pandemic, it was like, the virus isn't even real, and it's all just made up for the election
Yep.
to, elect Joe Biden or something, and it just made no sense. Like, I'm like, "Well, the rest of the world is also experiencing this, and they're not electing a president, so what are you
Yeah.
talking about?" And then there was the whole, "It's not a virus, it's just caused by 5G,"
Oh,
and
yeah.
so that was a weird one, and then there was so many, and then when the vaccine came out, all of it just transferred over to the vaccine. But the thing you mentioned about masks being, like, bad for you, it's always funny to me because the people that were against masks said they were toxic, or they give you pneumonia because they trap in, like, dirt and bacteria,
Mhm.
but then also they don't work to filter things out, according to those same people. So which one is it? Do they filter things or not? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. So yeah, the masks don't work. Just a basic, like, backlash against public health in general, was very surprising to me, as a
Yeah.
public health professional, because I kind of my whole training was basically like community health, and if we ever had a pandemic, it never would have crossed my mind that whole segments of the population would not kind of rally to protect other members of the community. That, to me, was so foreign to my mindset and so surprising. I kind of couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And I still, to this day, kind of like the whole how it got politicized, this whole like individualism, like, you can't make me do all these things. It's just, nobody should have to make you want to, not spread diseases. It's so
It was
wild.
shocking. Like, to me, it was just the idea that these people, like, didn't want to, like, help.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
sitting there like, "We are failing every group assignment right now." Like, this is,
I know.
it's like every stupid meme, like, "This is why we can't have nice things," wha
Exactly.
we just it's like all of a sudden you see, like, during the beginning when it first started, I feel like there was a lot of really good humanity, like the clapping for the
Yes.
social for the healthcare workers, getting food to people who needed it, offering discounts if you couldn't afford it because everyone lost their jobs. Like all of this really these kind things. And then it was like all of a sudden it just became this like black and white line or like a line in
Yeah.
the sand where like this is if you're this, then you're not, it still boggles my mind today in the same way with the current events today. It's like all of a
I
sudden
know.
it's like you are just shamed for like wanting people to be okay, and it's just it's shocking to me. And so with that, I really want to talk to you about the vaccine because
Yep.
obviously I remember a friend of mine was telling me we're no longer friends, but he was telling me he wasn't going to get the vaccine because I think it was Bill Gates,
Yeah.
mind control, and us becoming slaves.
Yeah.
And so,
Um,
like, how did
that's a good
all of
one.
this misinformation, like, first off, where is this stuff coming from? And like, how do
Yeah.
you combat it?
So, vaccine misinformation is not new. It's
Yeah.
something that's been going on since even earlier than the 90s, but it kind of had a resurgence in the 90s with the measles, MMR, and autism
Hmm.
paper that was published and later retracted. That, and then there was, mommy blogs, and that was kind of a new thing in the 90s, is these blogs that were on like, it wasn't even social media back then, it was just like websites, right, that would have like a chat board. All that, it kind of took off in these communities. And then there was like influencers that were on in that day and age, like Dr. Sears, and people that would be like writing books, about maybe we should space out vaccines, and maybe we should, like, just kind of seeding distrust,
Yeah.
from like an expert's perspective, and that was concerning. And then that kind of died down. There were still a stronghold of people 100% that would never get vaccines for their kids after that. But I feel like during COVID, the anti-vax kind of came back with a vengeance because
Yeah.
the pandemic, because for a few reasons, the pandemic kind of brought us, like you said, all into our homes. We were all online talking to echo chambers. So
Yeah.
it was a really good kind of opportunity for these grifters to spread their messages far and wide with people that are not going to disagree, right? And so there's this, report that was done by the Center for Countering Digital Hate back in like 2021, I think. And it was basically the disinformation dozen. It's like 12 people online where the biggest kind of misinformation originated from about vaccines. And there were people like Joe Mercola and wellness people, and all of them have like big social media accounts that got even bigger during the pandemic. And all of them have like a link in their bio that's where they're selling things like books and coaching and supplements and all
Mhm.
this stuff. So the anti-vaccine movement is actually kind of a multi-million-dollar industry because all these people are selling kind of alternative products,
Mhm.
um, and visits for like what do you call it, telehealth visits for like ivermectin prescriptions, and when later on with the America's Frontline Doctors and all kinds of other stuff. I think that's where it's coming from, honestly. So there's a difference between, and I talk about this in my classes. There's a difference between misinformation and disinformation. They're two
Yeah.
different things, even though they both involve the sharing of false information. So misinformation is like your friend who heard that thing about Bill Gates and is forwarding memes on the internet. Even though they're wrong, he thinks it's right and he thinks he's
Yeah.
helping, right?
Yep.
So that's misinformation. Then disinformation is like the big kind of people that are doing it, spreading misinformation for monetary or political gain. And
Yeah.
that's the problem we're having now, is that we have a lot of these sources of people that are making a lot of money off of misinformation. And politicians get a lot of votes when they spread misinformation. So it's terrible. Sometimes I think all of these people know what they're doing, but it's lucrative and it's helpful to them, so they just keep doing it.
Did it surprise you at all that a lot of it was coming from the vegan community? Like, I know you're vegan, I'm vegan, and like seeing some of the things that some of these like very big personalities were saying about
Yes.
COVID
Yes.
made me so mad.
Yeah, it was really surprising to me and really kind of actually very sad. Some people that I had been following before the pandemic, like for recipes and things that I loved, when they started coming out and saying things like that, I mean, I had to unfollow because I was like, I can't support this. There were a lot of people that I followed before the pandemic, vegan accounts that I would follow for like food and recipes and things. And when they started coming out talking about anti-vax stuff, I just had to unfollow because it was so disappointing, all of these people. And then I would see the ones that did say they were getting the vaccine or post a picture of themselves getting the vaccine, their comments section was just like use and all these horrible negative comments like unfollowing. So the vegan community really did surprise me during all of
Yeah.
this.
And I think part of it too was also fueled, like, Veg News did stories and plant-based news. They all did stories about if you are vegan, you're not going to get COVID or you're less likely to get COVID
My
or
gosh.
these will heal. Like, this is what to eat if you have long COVID. And let me tell you, as a vegan with long COVID, none of that works. Like,
Yeah.
what do you have to say about that? Like, where
Yeah,
does
I saw a lot of that. The boosting your immunity thing was big during all of this.
Mhm.
Everybody's products were and everybody's diet and everybody's exercise program and supplements and everything were supposed to be boosting immunity and preventing, and there's literally no science to back any of this. Like, I think even like my friend was posting something about her yoga class and how their website says that it boosts your immunity to go to yoga class. I'm like, okay, no. I'm like, it's good for you, but it's not doing anything for your infectious disease susceptibility, except maybe making it worse because you're around people, right?
God.
So
I was taking oh,
I
sorry, go
don't.
ahead.
No, I just didn't. So yeah, the boosting your immunity and like all of the diets and all the exercise stuff during the pandemic was really making me crazy. Um, because yeah, the only thing that can boost your immunity against COVID is really the vaccine, or if you had COVID.
Yeah. Wow. Because I was taking it was a supplement. It was like $80 a bottle. But for me, like it just like listening to you, like it gave me peace of mind. And it was God, it tasted so bad. It was like a golden seal type thing where it like had all these I forget what it's called now, but it had all these different things in it. And then I was taking like oil of oregano
Hmm.
capsules and zinc and vitamin D.
Yeah.
Whatever anyone said to do, I'm like, uh-huh, okay, great. And I still didn't go anywhere or do anything, but I still so do any of those things work?
So vitamin D is really good for your bones. So that's
Okay.
not a bad one to take. There's actually science about that.
Okay.
Oil of oregano is all over TikTok. I mean, I don't know. I've never seen any really good research saying it does anything and it smells really bad. But all of these, to your point about being, you're it if you are kind of watching these videos and ordering these things, and for anybody listening, it doesn't mean you're like a stupid person or anything.
Yeah.
These videos are designed to appeal to your fears. And that's why they're so effective. They will say, like, oh, this, and this can happen to you, but this can prevent it, or you don't need this because it has all these awful side effects. But this doesn't, it's all natural. And there's this naturalistic fallacy that they push these products like this is so much better for you. Basically anything man-made is bad and anything natural is good. So
Yeah.
things like, sunscreen is what's really causing cancer, not the sun. You've seen those
Ugh,
videos. So
I literally cannot anymore. Like,
yeah.
stop.
So that's where all these supplements that you were talking about were really took off during the pandemic because people didn't have health insurance and didn't have
Yeah.
access to going to the doctor and things. So that's a very real problem, and that's a void that gets filled with these grifters. And secondly, they were just scaring people online, like
Yeah.
just people that maybe do even have insurance, but just were like, well, maybe I should be taking that too. And, totally makes sense. They appeal to your fear and it causes you to act. That's
Do you
how
think
they make
that's
their money.
do you think that's still the problem with the boosters now too? Because I know when like I've been I've gotten every vaccine every time. Like
Yeah, me
I'm like
too.
first in line. I'm like, nope. I like give me a flu shot and vaccine in the same arm because I don't want both arms hurting. Let's just do it. Like I'm
Yeah,
great. Celebrate that shit. But like what obviously the number of people getting vaccinated is way, way, way down. Do
that's
you
right.
know what the current numbers are right
I
now?
do. So the last shot that came out in September of
Yep.
2023, 22% of adults got it and 14% of children under 18.
Mm,
So it's very low percentage. So what I think it is that there's been some kind of negativity around the fact that if you take the vaccine, you can still get COVID. And I think
sure.
people think it doesn't work or something because they're like, I get a lot of comments in my comment section that says, well, I got the vaccine and I got COVID in December, so much for that or something. I think people are misunderstanding like what these viral vaccines do. So like for flu, for example, people are very accepting of a flu shot. Um, and it's the same concept. You get a flu shot, not to prevent every single flu case that comes, but to make it not a severe case, right? And
Mhm.
COVID even has another kind of claim to fame is that we have data showing that it's actually preventive of long COVID in some cases. So
Mhm.
it's actually a really good idea to get and so hopefully now that we're going to be having just one a year, in the fall. It'll just be kind of part of people's fall wellness routines. Just last week, actually, the CDC, their committee on immunization practices met to make their recommendation guidelines for this September, and they didn't really change anything. Both flu and COVID are recommended for kids 6 months and older and adults. So anybody 6 months and older basically should get those 2 vaccines in the fall. And yeah, so it's the data shows that most of the hospitalizations for COVID are people that didn't get this last
Yeah.
booster, older people who didn't get the last booster, or even kids. Most of the kids that have been hospitalized, which thankfully it's not very many, it's much less than adults, but the ones that are hospitalized don't have the vaccine, so it does prevent severe disease. And so it's not, while it isn't going to prevent every case of COVID, it'll shift the cases to the more mild end of the spectrum.
That's fine with me.
Fine, yeah.
I would much rather have a mediocre COVID than bad
Yes,
COVID.
it's anything I can do to not be miserable.
Yeah,
I'm
and
gonna do it.
I'm curious, I use a spray called Covixel, and I love it. I don't know, is it legit? Do you know
Yeah,
do you know
I think it
okay.
is legit. I know, I remember you and I talking about it before. I had looked up their data, and
Mhm.
it's kind of preliminary right now. That's why I haven't talked about it on my channel, but I've heard people using it and liking it, and I think it's probably fine. I just haven't, like, my channel, I have to be, probably because I'm a university professor, I get paranoid. Like, unless there's I don't really talk about things that there's not like a study or a science to
Yeah,
back it up. You know what I mean? And they do have a little bit of data, but it wasn't kind of there yet.
yeah,
So I haven't talked about it on my channel. But that being said, there might be some now that I just don't know
yeah.
about. But
I've been
it
using
makes
it
sense.
since
The
October.
concept makes
Yeah.
sense.
So if you're not familiar with COVID, to whomever's listening out there, it's basically a nasal spray that coats your mucous membranes and keeps viruses from getting all up
Yeah.
in your nose, because that's really how COVID and most
Yes,
of the things enter, is through our nose.
that's
But there
right.
is one thing that doesn't enter through your nose, and that would be what, bird flu right now?
Yeah.
Or is this, and how are people getting bird flu?
So right now, people aren't really getting it. There
Okay.
are 3 cases that we know of that all 3 of these people were farm workers. So backing up a little bit, so avian influenza, these there's 2 strains of influenza, or 3, I think, that are called highly pathogenic avian influenza, are endemic in birds kind of worldwide. So they infect poultry farms in, kind of easily because it's a bird virus. So that has been going on. They know about it. It's been being monitored, and up to this point, the way people have dealt with it is when there's avian influenza on a farm, you have to kind of cull the whole flock because it's terrible, and we could go on and on for days
Yeah.
about big agriculture and how
Yeah.
horrible it is. Suffice it to say, that's been the way to deal with the highly pathogenic avian influenza. The bad thing that's kind of happened recently is that virus is now spreading to cattle, so dairy cattle. They're trying to, so that anytime a virus jumps species like that, we are concerned as epidemiologists. And this is just for us, like kind of one step closer to it being, because now this is in a mammal, like it's one step closer to it being in people. So up to this point, it hasn't been that easily spread between like the cows and people, or birds and people. The people that have had it have had mild cases, and they've all been fine. according to data from the WHO from like 2003 to the present, like 50% of the avian influenza in people has been fatal. So that's
Oh
why people
God.
are scared of a pandemic happening, because that would be obviously devastating, right? So luckily the 3 people in the US that have recently had it have all had mild cases. But it's scary. But so far what we have not seen is that person to person transmission. And once
Mhm.
that happens, that will be not good. Right now it's passing from cow to cow, or cows and birds to people, sometimes, not
Mhm.
very often. So it hasn't mutated to the point where it easily infects us, but yeah, it's a very big concern, and I feel like the surveillance that's going on is not probably where it needs to be. We've only There is a test, a person test for avian influenza. They've only given it about 50 people with close
Mhm.
proximity. It's the same as that COVID test that you were kind of talking about, where it's very limited and you have to like go to a special public health lab to get it. It's not like a widely available test at this particular point in time. So hopefully that'll get more utilized so we have a better picture
Mhm.
of what the surveillance is, especially if it's mild. You know, it's kind of hard to know who's got allergies and who has COVID and who has avian influenza, right? Of farm
God.
workers. So, but like I said, all of them have gotten it from animals at this
Mhm.
point, not from other people. Oh, good.
What's the raw milk that
Yeah.
people are getting sick from?
Yes.
Is that bird? What is that they're getting?
Yeah. So what happened was about, you know, a month or two ago, the FDA, knowing that we had this dairy cattle kind of outbreak, they did sort of a nationwide survey of the commercial milk supply, and in their study they found um, H5N1, the avian influenza, in the milk supply. People
Mm.
obviously were like, "Oh my gosh!" They didn't find in their study, they didn't find any like live or active virus, because that milk in the store had been pasteurized. So when you pasteurize milk, it kills all the active bacteria in it.
Yeah.
So what they were finding in it was just kind of dead virus, kind of like when you are still testing positive for COVID on a PCR test, but you're no longer infectious. It's just like the DNA of the virus is still kind of in there,
Yeah.
and being detected. It's the same kind of thing in the milk. So it's not active, but it's there. So that led people kind of one step further to say, like, okay, there are people drinking raw milk right now. Like, if you're drinking raw milk, like, it was always a bad idea, right? Raw
Mhm.
milk it has like listeria, E. coli, campylobacter, all kinds of bad bacteria is in
All
raw
the
milk.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's really dangerous. So the so now that there's people drinking raw milk, there's yet another layer of bad idea onto that, right?
I mean, honestly, and this isn't to push like my vegan agenda,
No, I
but
agree. It's for science. I mean, like, it just
but
doesn't make any sense. If you're gonna
even if
drink
you
milk, people,
yeah,
don't drink the raw kind. That's what I
but
keep
even
saying.
like COVID was animal,
Right.
correct? Like it came from an animal, and it's just like we keep getting all these things telling us like don't do this because you can get sick when people aren't listening. Like, what do
Yeah.
you? I mean, I don't even. What do you?
I'm
I
not
know.
talking about lab leak theories, because
No, no, no. Absolutely not. I do not buy into conspiracy theories. I don't support them. I understand the logic behind them because people want to make sense of
No,
something that doesn't make any
exactly.
sense. But you know what can people do to kind
Yeah.
of protect themselves from COVID, from
Yeah. Well
bird flu?
I would say, I mean, I would definitely get the vaccine in the fall when it comes
Mhm.
out, for sure. That's like a no-brainer. We'll do kind of all the respiratory viruses kind of have the same kind of thing. You can wear a mask in, highly concentrated areas where there's no ventilation. People kind of don't do that anymore, but it really does work to prevent the amount of virus, or it reduces the amount of virus that you take in and put out, right? I mostly will wear one if I feel like I have a scratchy throat or something, but I'm not sick. I'll just wear one around because I'm like, well, in case this is something that's not testing positive yet, I don't want to get somebody sick. So
Yeah.
I think people forget that it's an effective tool, that you can use. Also, kind of, I don't know, I've sort of changed my, I guess, risk budget for things after the pandemic. Do I go to crowded clubs? No, not at all. Do I go to crowded bars? Never. Do I go to a concert that I've been wanting to see for 5 years that's crowded? Yes, I will do
Yeah.
that. But that's in my risk budget. But the
Yeah.
other stuff is like, I don't need to do that. But if you're a
Yeah.
type of person who loves to go dancing every Friday night, do it, but just limit other things you do. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of what I make myself sort of a risk budget so I can kind of limit the amount of concentrated activities I do with a bunch of other people.
So, have you heard what the governor of New York is trying to do
Yes.
in
So that's just cuckoo bananas to me. Like, what she's
right?
talking about is I guess they're trying to ban masks on the subway
Mhm.
because of
Yep.
crime. And, that's just, to me, what that does is it just kind of makes a space that was kind of accessible to a certain segment of the population now
Yeah.
not anymore accessible. So people that are disabled or have long COVID, or, you know, people that really need to wear a mask for whatever reason, immunocompromised folks, etc.,
Mhm.
now will not feel safe on crowded trains if that ends up happening. And
I hope it does.
it already upset me when we did away with masks in medical settings, because that to me was a no-brainer. Like, why didn't we just keep that going? Because people
Yeah.
go to the doctor when they're sick. We know viruses can kind of hang around in those exam rooms. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that why we did that. And also for the same reason, like that's a place where immunocompromised and disabled folks could feel safe going. That was my mother. That was like the only place she felt safe going during the pandemic. And now that, because she's on medication that makes her immunocompromised, and now she doesn't feel comfortable going. She still does, but it's not as safe feeling to her. So
Yeah.
I feel like the doing that in a public place, and it's not even like they're saying everybody has to wear a mask. They're saying the people that want to can't, which is
Yeah.
really, I just don't understand. To me, that's bananas.
To me, it just infuriates me because
Yeah.
I mean, I already don't like being on a crowded subway.
Oh,
Like, it's gross, it's dirty,
yeah.
it's smelly, and people get on there real sick. And
I know they're
I don't want
coughing
to get
and yep.
real sick. I haven't gotten sick, I'm gonna knock on wood, since I got COVID 2 years ago. And I would prefer not to
I know.
again. And it's just like all of a sudden, like masking is being conflated with
Demonized,
other,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just like, we're just doing our thing. Like, stop.
When
But
you look at countries that have a community mindset, like Japan
yeah,
or something, like nobody
yep,
cares. I was there last July for work, and everybody wore a mask. And it wasn't even
yeah,
like a surge of COVID. Like in the office, we were all in the meeting room, everyone had a mask on. And it was really funny because some of my coworkers I hadn't seen them wear a mask in a long time. And then we're in the meeting rooms and I see them with their masks on. It's like such a peer pressure thing. Like over there, it felt so normal to
yeah,
have it on. And then over here, it feels normal to not have it on. And then when you do have it on, you feel like people think you're weird. So it's like,
yeah.
it just is a different culture.
It really is. I lived in Thailand for a while, and people. I mean, you'd get on an airplane with a mask on everywhere. You'd wear a mask. Like the
Yeah.
pollution was bad, everything, and now it's like when people wear masks here, because I feel like New York is still very much like, I wasn't here during the height of COVID, but people still, I think, take it a little more seriously than other places. And I'll see people, especially because our numbers are going up again now and
Yeah,
no one's talking about it, but like
I know.
I still pay attention to it. Like I look and see like how bad it is. And more people are wearing masks again. And so now, like, I was in an elevator with someone the other day and I wasn't wearing a mask because I used the Covixel and I'm like, either it's going to work or I'm going to get COVID, but I want it, like, I'm just waiting. But this guy gets on the elevator with me and he's wearing two surgical masks. And I'm like, God. And then he coughs and I'm like, sir, like,
You're like, this guy's legit sick.
yeah. And I'm just like, oh, dear God, Diana, my God, like, really?
But you're
I mean,
fine.
days later, I'm fine.
Ooh,
But, years ago, that would have just put me into a tailspin
I
because
know. Isn't it
what are you
crazy?
doing? But yeah. And then I'm like, why are you, like, if you are really sick, like, please put on a mask that's like not
And
a little
yeah, and don't
surgical
be like
mask,
going to Trader Joe's and like, like, what are you doing? It's
which
just
I
not way. Yeah,
completely, but
I
I
know.
understand, like, if even when I had COVID, like, I had to go get, what's it called? Paxlovid. Is that what it's
Yeah,
called?
I
It's
had
been a
that
while.
too.
Yeah, but I had to go get it. And so I wore like an N95 or a
Yeah.
KN95 over
Yeah,
the
right. Like, what?
N95, which
How
was
else would you get
so
it? Yeah.
bad. But, I don't know. So we are running out of time, but I do want to know what you're drinking.
Oh, I am drinking coffee. I know it's very, very exciting. But yeah, I actually don't drink alcohol. So I was like thinking in this podcast, I wonder if we're going to be talking about that because I don't really know that much about it.
Well, I've only published one episode so far, and
Oh,
I'll share with you, I'm actually drinking Curious Number 9 from Curious Elixirs, and it is non-alcoholic.
oh,
It is a ruby rosé with like
oh, how
non-alcoholic
cool.
Chardonnay, South African Canna, and California poppy.
Oh, you have to send me the link to that. That sounds
Yeah,
delightful.
right? It's very lovely. And so they sent me like 2 4-packs, 6-packs, 4-packs.
How
They
very
sent me
cool.
2 things of it. And I was like, I don't want to drink all the time. Emergency drinks, it came about because like we would have emergency drinks, like talk about life.
No, exactly. And
But
coffee is an emergency. I will just say
oh,
that. So
yeah.
it is appropriate.
Where is your favorite place to go for like an emergency drink?
I would say anywhere where I can get an iced coffee if I'm like going somewhere in the morning and I haven't had coffee. Like I'm very picky about my hot coffee. Like if I go someplace, it's weird, but I can drink iced coffee from pretty much anywhere and not be like picky about it. So if I'm
Mhm.
leaving the house in the morning and I forgot to have it or I didn't have time, that's most definitely my emergency drink and is stopping for an iced coffee on my way wherever I'm going, teaching or
I
whatever.
support I fully support that. Well, Dr. Kat, thank you so much for this. Like, I know I messaged you. I was like, I might fangirl a little, but
Oh
like,
my God,
grateful
no
for you.
need, no need.
Thank
I'm just a
you.
nerd.
Well, I appreciate it because you really have helped so many people, and it's so appreciated. I'm going to make sure in the show notes that people have all the information on where to follow you. And
We'll share
thank
the
you.
clips. And thank you. I
Yes,
hope if anybody's still listening after my nerdy science diatribes, thank you. Glad you're still
people are.
with us.
Well, have a great day. Thank you so much, and see you back here for the next episode of Emergency Drinks, everyone.
Bye.